Welcome everyone for this ninth episode of the Venly Expert Talks. We're streaming this live now on Twitter, LinkedIn, and YouTube, and we're also recording this for our podcast on Spotify and Apple. And just as a reminder, why we're doing this, we do this to inspire this generation of Web3 builders with great stories by great minds. And you can ask your questions and comments. So you can comment in LinkedIn or on LinkedIn, on YouTube, and also on Twitter. And we'll see those questions popping up here. And then Jon will give his best answers. So I want to introduce you and welcome Jon Jordan, a blockchain gaming expert. Jon, I will pick your brain on everything related to blockchain gaming today. And I know you've been in this space for a long time with a really interesting vision on where this space is going. And we had a few talks in the past in different panels on blockchain gaming. So now I think that the seats have changed and I'm going to be interviewing you now. So can you give a short introduction about yourself, about your background in life and in crypto?
Thanks for inviting me on the show. Yes, so I've been in games now for over 20 years, doing different things during that time, mainly on the media side. So a lot of sort of writing about sort of business and tech. Co-founded a media company, gamer, so did a lot of stuff in mobile free to play. And then start of 2018 was when I fell down that hole. So that's, I guess, broadly where a lot of the gaming stuff sort of started happening on Ethereum. So that was sort of the era of Toolkit. And then ever since then, I've just sort of been curious about all this being launched. So sort of obviously play a lot of these games and try and understand, why some work and why some don't work. And obviously 2021, we've seen an enormous acceleration, whether it's sort of mass adoption yet or not. I guess up for discussion. I always get a bit nervous when you use the expert. You have to be quite humble that everything changes so fast that what you knew today is not necessarily very useful tomorrow.
Yeah, it is, and everything is going very fast. And yeah, you're definitely one of the biggest experts that we follow in the blockchain gaming scene. I see that your connection is not super stable, so I don't know if in the meantime we can tweak a little things to get this voice coming in trade. But if you can do something about connection, I don't know if it's gonna work. I don't know if it's on my end or if the listener is gonna experience the same thing. But yeah, let's continue the conversation. Jon, if you hear me fine, what blockchain games you liked? How much time every day do you have to play those games? Do you still have time?
I mean, one thing I do think with blockchain games is they are sort of different in the sense that they are, they're not sort of games that you sort of play like you would play kind of Call of Duty or something, or League of Legends. So they're not sort of necessarily games where you sort of go in and you have this sort of Twitch gaming experience that you have to sort of play for 20 minutes or half an hour or something. So a lot of the stuff with blockchain games, I think, is there is a sort of game play element to it, but then there's a lot of sort of meta around it, which may be stuff around, I don't know, restaking tokens or sort of trading NFTs or things like that. So I wouldn't say I spend a lot of time sort of actively playing in terms of doing the basic gameplay thing. So even with something like Splinterlands, which I guess is the best example, where a match in Splinterlands takes about 2 or 3 minutes. So I might do play a few sort of matches of that a day, but what I'm equally doing is sort of looking at sort of the trading that's going on with the NFTs and looking at sort of restaking things and that sort of thing. So broadly from a gaming point of view, I don't play. I don't spend hours gaming every day, but I do spend sort of hours looking at sort of these things and looking at what the NFT drops are and that sort of thing. So I just think it's sort of I think as games have continued over. It's when I was a kid, basically all you did was play the game, and then suddenly when free to play mobile came in, you were doing something different with free to play mobile. There was a game, but there was also the rise of things like idle gamers where you sort of played and then went away and came back again. So games as experiences, I think, have got to become very more sort of less concentrated. I think in how you do them, and I think the other thing about blockchain is you have people who game in different ways. So some people sort of game, say for Axie Infinity, some people sort of game to get sort of tokens, and some people sort of then manage people who are doing the scholarship thing, and then some people sort of own NFTs and participate in the community at a sort of higher level. And one of the interesting things I think about blockchain games is they sort of allow these different sort of roles within a sort of gaming community, whereas previously you basically sort of played the game and that was all you did.
Makes sense. Awesome. Yeah. Totally. And I think what I play, or the game that I interact with, is like Abigochi, and indeed it's like a few minutes a day by betting your gotchi, and then you can play mini games as well if you want. So indeed it's different. Talking about the traditional games and the blockchain games, the question that you often ask in your panels is, will traditional game developers enter the blockchain space, and what is their biggest hurdle at the moment?
Well, I guess to an extent we're sort of seeing that now with particularly with Ubisoft over the last sort of week or so. I mean, I think my sort of long-term view is over the next 10 years, pretty much, well, the majority of games I think will use blockchain for something. They may not all have tokens, they may not even all have NFTs, but I think they will use blockchain for some elements of what they're doing. To that degree, it's a little bit like every game now uses some online capability, but that doesn't mean all games are now sort of multiplayer games, but they all use the internet for something, and most of them have some sort of multiplayer component. So I think that's what happens over the next 10 years. But I think there are some very different ways in which games use blockchain. So at the moment, most of the games we see, are very sort of blockchain heavy. They sort of come from crypto enthusiasts, and they tend to be bigger on the sort of blockchain side of things than on the gaming side of things. That's just how those teams have developed those products. And also it takes at least a year, I think, to make a good game, and probably a couple of years to make a really good game. So we haven't really had teams who have had the time or the sort of resources to actually make really good games. So at the moment, the games tend to be more sort of blockchain crypto heavy. Obviously, what we're seeing now is sort of the first wave of traditional sort of game companies like Ubisoft. They're not going to make a full-on blockchain game, but what they're doing is they're adding NFTs to existing products. That's the easiest thing to do. That's sort of, NFTs are sort of the low-hanging fruit there. But as you sort of see, you do end up potentially causing problems with that community. So, the Ghost Recon community, it looks like some of them at least are not particularly happy about NFTs, even though you're basically getting them for free. You're not even buying them. Basically, Ubisoft is giving you NFTs for free. But you have this sort of clash there. And I think that's the biggest problem for traditional game developers, is particularly if they're trying to bring blockchain and integrate with existing IP, then obviously you have existing community, which I'm sure some of them will come to love it, but at the moment it seems to be I think a small minority who are fairly active against it. And so you sort of have an interesting sort of situation there where you're trying to sort of encourage people or persuade people of the benefits of blockchain, which I think are definitely there, but those games have not had blockchain in. So I still think probably for the next sort of 6 months or so, the momentum is really with the people who are kind of sort of coming from the blockchain side of things, where they've made blockchain first sort of products, and it's all original content. So Axie and Splinterlands and Alien Worlds and all these other Illuvium, all these other games are they are games created for the blockchain. So there's no audience backlash that it's on the blockchain, because it's the reason it exists is on the blockchain. So I think that's the sort of big challenge for traditional games companies, is sort of how they can bring what is a very different sort of very different technology, and obviously one that has other implications in terms of sort of sort of potentially climate change, potentially things like kind of real world value, financial value. How you can combine that with sort of products that have in many cases been around for a number of years and haven't had any of those sort of any of those features before. So I think there'll definitely be some learning pains there, as Ubisoft is sort of finding out. I think the backlash stuff is a little bit overblown at the moment. I think that will always be there, but I think it won't be such a focus on it. I think that just because it's the first big game to get some NFTs, that's why there's been so much sort of backlash about that particular product.
Great, yeah, super interesting and great answer as well on the issues that Ubisoft faced with its community. And indeed, like the education is going to be key to educate about the benefits of blockchain gaming to the existing communities of those gaming giants. When we talk about blockchain and gaming, we often and quickly talk about play to earn games. But is that the only way blockchain technology can be applied into gaming? What are other advantages blockchain technology brings to gaming and their business models?
Yeah, the whole play to earn thing. I'm actually sort of. I mean, I think fundamentally, play to earn is, it is sort of part of any blockchain game in the sense that by interacting in that game or doing something in that game, depending on what level, you are driving value in in that game ecosystem. So I think we have to sort of be honest and upfront and say, one of the key things about blockchain is it does bring every transaction in that's interacting with a blockchain in a blockchain game has some value attached to it. Now that value might be tiny, it might be a millionth of a dollar or something. One of the advantages of blockchain is you can suddenly do these micro transactions. We're seeing this quite a lot with some Bitcoin sort of payment kind of methods where people are throwing, you can win like a couple of stats or something like that, tiny amounts of money. But I think probably one of the sort of things we'll look back on for like 2021 is at the moment every blockchain game sort of positions itself as a play to earn game, which to me suggests that people can sort of come in and play the game and earn a reasonable sum of money. So I guess we've seen with Axie Infinity people in developing countries earning, depending on the price of the token, 10 $20 a day or something like that, which is obviously fairly substantial for them. Now I think that people will always be able to earn a certain amount of money playing a game, but I think to get to those sort of even those sort of levels is a peculiarity of Axie Infinity and it being the first game and it having this very strong growth sort of curve over the last kind of few months. And I think other games will get to that scale, but I'm not terribly convinced that a lot of the games that are positioning themselves as play to earn games will be able to sort of fulfill the sort of same model as Axie Infinity, because Axie Infinity has been around for a long time. It's been around 4 years and it's sort of gone through various stages of development. It wasn't the sort of game that launched with all these tokens and all these NFTs. It built up value, slowly over time. And a lot of these other games, I think, are trying to, do what Axie Infinity did in 4 years. They're trying to do it in like 4 months, And I just don't think, from an economic sort of theory point of view, that you can sort of build up an economy that lots of people can extract money from via play to earn. That is sustainable. So you tend to get some of these games that the token price sort of goes up as people start playing them, and then the token price goes up really, explosively as people start to sort of speculate on these token prices, and then at some point something happens in the economy, and then the token price starts going down. Then everyone sort of sells out, and you have this sort of typical sort of pump dump sort of graph going on with the token price, which is obviously not not sustainable and not good for anyone. So I do worry a little bit about the play to earn sort of positioning of games. I think there are other ways of doing it. So I think Blanco's block parties is sort of the great example of that, where there's no sort of cryptocurrency you can earn out, but you can earn some of these NFTs in the game. So actually at the moment they just started this week a deal with Amazon Prime. So if you have an Amazon Prime account and you create a Blanco's block party account, or you already have one, you can basically go in, you can get a free NFT. And that NFT is currently selling for like $9 on the marketplace. So the cheapest one, sorry, is $9. So that's not enough to sort of anyone to live on. But basically, you're getting like a free NFT that you can sell for a certain amount of money. So in a sense, that's play to earn, but it's not play to earn in the same way like earning the smooth love potion in Blanco's is. So I think say every blockchain game has play to earn, but play to earn as a sort of almost like a game design sort of genre, I think is we'll look back on that, and I hope we'll see that just being like a growing pain that we kind of had, or like a something that everyone talked about because Axie Infinity got big really fast. And as I say, I think in the coming years there'll be games as big as Axie out there, but I think you have to let them develop their economy in a more sort of evolutionary manner than sort of a sort of revolutionary, trying to sort of force the economy to grow big so people can make money. Yeah, sustainability. Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome. Yeah, super interesting. And yeah, thanks for sharing that vision. I have the feeling that your vision is like 6 months ahead of everyone else on crypto Twitter, on this blockchain gaming and play to earn. So it's great to hear that coming from you here in that Venly Expert Talk. Other question: if you would advise people, the indie game developers of today that are looking into blockchain gaming, what advice would you give them besides the advice of sticking to the community, having a lot of interaction with the community, and don't build things one day to the other? Yeah, what other advice would you have?
That's yeah, it's sort of a difficult one. I mean, I think I think people do have to spend sort of time. You sort of have to clear your diary and spend time really, on crypto Twitter and in the Discords, and just kind of following some projects and kind of getting a feel of how they go about sort of building community. So, it's a dangerous word to use, I think, because we use it a lot in blockchain gaming. We say it's all about the community, and community is sort of level, is like the bottom level, is like a layer zero sort of thing. And I totally agree that is the case. But then it becomes quite hard to give people advice on sort of how to build community. That sort of depends a little bit on, or quite a lot on, the product. So I think that there's a case of if people are really, I mean, I definitely think people should be thinking about this, because this is where the industry is going. But you do need to sort of really spend weeks and probably months following a lot of these things and trying to get a grip, and sort of starting to buy NFTs and sort of having some skin in the game of what's working and what's not working. And I think the other thing is, and that is something we're still lacking, in that not many sort of good game designers have really got their head around what crypto will allow them to do. I think they see the first time game designers get into sort of crypto and blockchain, they see that it really disrupts a lot of the sort of best practice that they've previously had in how you design game economies. Because previously, game economies for, let's say, free-to-play mobile games have sort of been they've not really mattered that much. You've always been able to tweak them, and it's not been real money involved. So there's a certain amount of sort of flexibility. Whereas blockchain economies tend to be much more important, because there is kind of sort of real value attached to them, and they are much more explosive in terms of feedback. So if the token starts going up in price, then that generally encourages people to like, oh, what's going on here? I'll buy some of that token. Then the token price goes up, and then suddenly, you may have not done anything as a designer, but suddenly, thousands of people are sort of buying your token, which may not be actually what you want. So I think kind of thinking seriously about an actual game you want to make that uses blockchain in a way that is holistic to the design that you have. I think at the moment we're just seeing a lot of people copying Axie Infinity and going, right, we're going to have a game, we're going to have a governance token, we're going to have a utility token, we're going to have some NFTs, and this is sort of how it's going to work. And the one thing I sort of can guarantee is if you copy Axie Infinity, you're not going to be successful, because Axie Infinity is a very sort of specific product in its time, I think. But I think you have to embrace it. And I think we are seeing with some sort of really sort of interesting and the more, they're not traditional sort of games, but things like sort of Parallel, and there's this sort of one that's just launching called Saints and Sinners, which is sort of like a big sort of game theory, Prisoner's Dilemma thing going on with NFTs. And there's some really quite innovative projects that are being sort of worked on. But they're sort of coming, they're not really coming from the traditional game space. So I think a way of coming up with an interesting sort of synthesis of what makes a good traditional game, and what levers does blockchain give you in terms of, particularly sort of building community and allowing people to own their stuff in the game, and how does that play out? And I think more generally, over time, we're going to see we're going to see the division between I'm a game developer and you're a player. That's really going to dissolve away, I think. So you're going to have as I say, different sort of roles in the community. So there'll be players, there'll be sort of community managers who are also maybe they're getting paid something by a smart contract somewhere, and there'll be developers who maybe come on board for a certain period of time and then go off again, and much more, obviously it's open source software, so it's much more sort of complicated, and it won't be a company behind it all taking the money. All these things are sort of up for grabs at the moment.
Right.
Which makes it then makes it hard to give sort of clear advice because there isn't any.
No, that was already great. Yeah, a lot of advice, and I like the advice. Maybe I would add, looking for the right network or blockchain technology to build on, like making the right decision on which network you want to build on for the right reasons, and also look at grants, because the space is like full of grants, which is positive, but also can also be negative. Just don't choose for a specific blockchain just for the grant. But if you want to get some help in developing your game, know that there are a lot of blockchains giving out grants to help you building those. Going to metaverses, so I'm like just throwing in buzzwords with play to earn, blockchain gaming, and now metaverses. But metaverses, will gaming be the biggest use case for metaverses in 2022, or what other use cases do you see from a blockchain gaming standpoint, but what other use cases do you see for the metaverse?
Yeah, I have to say I'm not entirely convinced that I have a good definition of what a metaverse sort of actually is. So it's sort of a bit dangerous to talk about them. I guess I would say, trying to be a bit more specific, that we already have certain projects that I guess are the closest that we have to metaverses. So I guess sort of Decentraland is one that's been around for a while now. Somnium Space, and I guess the one I'm most interested in from that point of view is the Sandbox, and I guess the Sandbox is slightly more focused on games than something like Decentraland. Decentraland, you can sort of build what you want in there, and we're starting to see some interesting sort of stuff going on there, with people building offices and art galleries and that sort of thing in there. I think the problem I've had with those sort of metaverses in the past is because you can do anything in there tends to be not a lot of focused activity in there, which I think has meant there's not really been a good reason to go into those metaverses. I think something like the Sandbox, which is much more game focused. The team behind it made sort of user generated content mobile games. That's what they've done for the last sort of 10 years. So they're coming out at it from the game side, and while you can just make experiences in the Sandbox, although it's not live yet, but you people are sort of building those to be plugged in when it does go live. The sort of the key thing is it's very much like a sort of a game maker type experience when you're making things there. So it's much more like a Minecraft sort of Roblox thing, where you can build these little interactive experiences. They're not big games necessarily, but you can build little things in there. So that to me is sort of a good sort of first combination of, it has enough openness, I think, for it to be correctly described, at least for me, as a metaverse, because people can just build, people can just buy land, and we're seeing people like Adidas just come in and buy land, and smart Bored Ape Yacht Club and some of these other sort of crypto communities buying land there and then building their own buildings or their own experiences in there. The Walking Dead is another sort of big one who are doing that, and I think there's I wouldn't say the Sandbox is the fulfillment of what a metaverse will be. It's definitely not that, but I think for me that's the first, when that launches, hopefully I assume in 2022, kind of when it launches fully, and people can just like turn up and walk around these worlds. That to me will give the first sort of concrete experience of what some of the key things that a metaverse would have. That it would be open, that anyone can come in and experience it, that it has some sort of payment system, that the people who are creating this sort of stuff automatically can generate money from it without having to go through sort of the traditional banking system. And also that there's some sort of way that sort of emergent behavior can happen. So people, I imagine, in the Sandbox will just throw parties for different things, and it's not going to be the Sandbox dev team has to organize everything. The people will just be doing their own things in there. So I think that'll be, to me, the first sort of interesting foot into the metaverse. And obviously, there are much more ambitious sort of plans, I guess. For some of us, when we think of the metaverse, we think about putting on VR headsets, and loads of people are building out those things as well. So I think that's just harder to do from a tech point of view. But the sandbox is one I'm really interested in, and that will be very game focused. I think for me, that's the biggest thing with metaverses is what do you do in them? That's sort of the problem. And obviously, games aren't everything. There's lots of other things we do in the world, so it's not games. But I think games are a good starting point to kind of build community.
Cool. Yeah, it makes total sense. We don't have much time left, Jon. So I have two more questions that I really want to ask you. One is, and you touched upon in your previous answer, that was Adidas and Bored Ape Yacht Club partnering and buying land in the sandbox. And now we also saw that Nike and Artifact partnered. Why do you think that those brands are so interested in NFT projects? And do you think that those big brands will also partner with a gaming NFT or NFT game project?
I mean, I think it's been one of the surprising things to me that brands, have been so sort of active in getting into blockchain. So I've sort of thought about this a little bit and sort of spoken to some people, and I think it actually is quite radical that, at this point, before sort of blockchain, brands were having to, deal with sort of traditional advertising, and traditional advertising is sort of quite disruptive. It's basically, you're sort of doing something, you're watching TV or you're reading a magazine, and basically you get interrupted by some advertising to sort, and that's sort of how that model's worked for decades. Clearly, with sort of digital stuff, that's sort of good for brands in the sense that the fashion brands can make these incredible sort of costumes that they're just digital. So you can make one, you can make as many as you want. There's no sort of bill of sort of material. You don't have to get craftsmen to do all this sort of stuff. So there's a sort of fantastical element in which they can, Gucci or Dolce & Gabbana can build out these incredible things that just look, people just like look at those and go, why wouldn't I want to wear that on my avatar in the metaverse? So I think there's an exciting point of view from that point of view. But I also think from when you start to think about, what brands want to do, I mean, brands don't really want to interrupt what you're doing to show you an advert. But brands sort of, this is sort of a terrible term to use, but people, brands want to be part of sort of the user experience. They want to be part of people's experiences. And suddenly, I think with things like metaverses, they can sort of start to do that. So, the fact that Nike bought a NFT sort of creative company that made sneakers, is sort of makes total sense, because Nike is, if people are in the metaverse, Nike want them to wear Nike shoes. Everyone, Nike's a brand that people love. So why wouldn't you? And you can imagine Nike doing sort of airdrops to people, or there's lots of ways in which these brands can now interact in these sort of digital experiences, and they can earn money by selling things, but they can also sort of give stuff away, and because it's NFTs, people can then sell them on, and it just becomes a much more holistic way of brands interacting with users. I think it becomes harder for things like, obviously a lot of advertising is for things like food. So that's obviously harder for I don't know, Burger King to make us want to buy burgers in the metaverse. But so I think there are some elements around that, but particularly like the high end fashion stuff and the very high end consumer sort of focused brands. The metaverse for them actually gives them a much more positive sort of situation, I think, than they have in the real world. So I think that's why they've been so active there.
Cool. Yeah, definitely. And didn't Burger King do? I know that in Belgium, Burger King, or maybe it was another burger brand, they had their recipe on audio, and that was like an NFT.
I think you're right. Yes.
Unlock. Yeah, and then Pepsi did one as well. So yeah, indeed, many brands are coming, and I love your saying that it's to be part of the experience of their audience and their users, and makes total sense indeed. Last question. Do you have any bold predictions when it comes to blockchain gaming for next year or maybe the years after?
Bold predictions. Yeah. I mean, when I've sort of thrown around a lot, I'm not sure how bold it is. So at the moment, the sort of the game sector is generally seems to be about sort of sort of annual revenue of about $200 billion. That's sort of roughly, I mean, obviously it's an estimate, but that's roughly how big the games market is. So at the moment, that's how much money everyone playing games in different forms sort of gives to people who make games. That's sort of the flow of sort of revenue of a year. So that's, that's a fairly large amount of money. And obviously with blockchain games, what happens is a little bit different because while some money will go direct from, say, kind of players to developers because there'll be NFT drops, primary drops, over time, most of the money actually kind of cycles between players because, I have an NFT and I put it on a marketplace and you buy it off me, and the developer will get maybe 5%. That's sort of the margin they tend to go for. But 95% obviously goes between us. So I sell you an NFT, you get the NFT, I get 95% of the money. So the model is quite different economically. So I think quite quickly we go from like a $200 billion sort of games market to like a $1 trillion of transactional value. So obviously that's a bit different because that money is sort of recycling around, because I might sell $1,000 NFT to you and then you might sell that NFT at $1,000 to someone else. And so in terms of transactional value, that's $2,000 has sort of happened, even though there's only one NFT. So it's a slightly different model, but I do kind of think that's something, not so much a prediction, but that's sort of something, a benchmark I'm sort of looking for to at what point does the games market sort of switch and we stop talking about money, the sort of the value of the market, and we start talking about sort of transactional value of the market, which is just a different way of thinking about it. And I think, $1 trillion is just like a nice round number, but I think that can happen fairly quickly. I would be surprised if in 5 years' time we're not sort of at that level, to be honest.
Nice. Awesome. Yeah, that's a great prediction. And pretty bold. But indeed, the volume is different than today's volume. We need to see things in a different way. Thank you so much. Again, last question, but this is really the last one. Who should we get on as next guest on our podcast if you had to choose someone for us?
So the people that I've mentioned, or the projects I've mentioned, the Sandbox, I think is going to be really big in 2022. So maybe Sebastian from the Sandbox, who you I think know. I don't know if you've had him on already.
Yeah, we've had him. Yeah,
he'd be one. And actually, you had him on already. Okay, good. You're ahead of the game. And actually, one partly because I've been talking about advertising, and partly I've just done a podcast with him today. Actually, so there's a guy called Sam Huber from AdMix. And they're really at the forefront of doing this sort of NFT advertising kind of platform stuff. So he's really sort of charismatic and really sort of into this new sort of kind of world of sort of why advertising is going to be really cool in the metaverse. So he's someone I would recommend.
Awesome. Okay, great. Well, thank you so much, John, for letting us pick your brain and for all those great answers on the questions. And I'm wishing you a good end of year, and I'm also wishing you a lot of time that you can spend discovering new blockchain games for us. And I would say to everyone that doesn't follow John yet on Twitter, do so, and also subscribe to his newsletters, even the weekly one. That's a free one, if I'm correct. It's just great. The content in it is great. So thank you so much, John, for being here with us today.
Lovely. Thank you very much. I enjoyed that. Sorry for the connection problems.
No worries. Great. Bye-bye. The next talk will be in 2 weeks, and that talk would be with Arul, from Polytrade, and we're going to talk about real-world businesses navigating the crypto space and assets. So that's going to be super interesting as well. Just before New Year's Eve, make sure to join us in the conversation on social as well. And if you have any questions, prepare them and post them in the chat. Thank you, and see you next time.